Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 25th of January, and we're quickly wrapping up the month here, it seems. You can always get your latest weather information, no matter what time of month it is, at 800-473-0391. And online, of course, weather.gov/Alaska, or give us an email anytime if you can't find what you're looking for, whether that's online on the NOAA Weather Radio or Marine Band, or on the Alaska Weather Information line right there at 800-472-0391. See, I do know the number there. Here's a look at southeast Alaska, and the orange areas are areas that we are going to watch out for the possibility of developing high winds. A high wind watch is posted for these areas, including Prince of Wales Island and Baranof Island and the southern and the central inner channels there. And we're watching for winds to come up as we head into tomorrow and into Friday there. Southeasterlies 25 to 35 sustained with gusts above 60 miles per hour there. Of course, that could bring some damage to the area. So we're going to keep an eye on that. If it looks like this is going to be something that is going to develop, we'll turn this into a high wind warning or a wind advisory for these areas. So be prepared. This is your heads up. Hey, something's coming your way. Watch means watch out. It's possible. And stay tuned for more details. And of course, we'll have those for you here tomorrow, as well as weather.gov/Juneau, or if you're on Twitter, great place to find information if you're on Twitter, and you can set that up so it kind of buzzes your phone. If you're away from things for a while and you come back into service or hit the Wi-Fi, it will alert you that you've got a message from the Weather Service office, any one of them, if you set that up through Twitter there. So love that feature, and it's a great thing. You can text it to your phone as well. Here's a look at the Alaska range, and the yellow areas, of course, mean an advisory is in effect. Wind advisories posted for the Denali area and regions all the way across the eastern Alaska range and the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. Now, west of the Toe Cutoff, the wind advisory is in effect right now. We're expecting winds from this point all the way into Thursday night and Friday morning to be pretty strong and gusty. In that case, we're expecting those winds to blow from the south up to 60 miles per hour or so. So west of the Toe Cutoff, that area is already looking at some gusty wind potential. Now, everywhere else along the Alaska range, you're probably going to see winds start to pick up as we head into the early morning hours tomorrow, and then overnight and into Fridays when it should really start to pick up. Those winds, again, will be strong out of the south and southeast, anywhere from about 40 to 50 miles per hour there. So wind advisory is not the worst of it. But certainly something that you'll notice if you're driving a high-profile vehicle, or perhaps you're taking the big rig northward or southward through some of the passes. So pay attention to the weather there and hold on to the wheel a little bit more, and be prepared for a couple good gusts as you go through that region. Look out to the west also shows we're still dealing with a winter weather advisory through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, Campbell, and Savunga included. What that means is we're going to continue to see those northerly winds, and they're going to be strong, up to about 50 miles per hour or so. Expect to see poor visibility, or not to see at all. Half-mile visibility in that case, with blowing snow the main issue, and wind chill values down to about 35 below for Campbell and Savunga in the St. Lawrence Island and Bering Strait region. That will continue until 9 o'clock tomorrow before we let that go. So a winter weather advisory out there around the Bering Strait. And not to be left out, while we do not have a high wind watch out for the Portage Valley or Turnagain Arm area anymore, the weather system is still there. Maybe not quite as strong, but we're still expecting the warmth. We're still expecting some strong and gusty conditions to move through the region. And we're still expecting some slick roads as a result of the melting of that top layer of snow in south central. So be prepared even though that high wind watch is not out, it still looks like there's still going to be that general weather pattern that is going to bring us a Chinook type event. So up and down the Kenai Peninsula and the Cook Inlet region, a lot of that will likely not see a great deal of precipitation because of that downsloping or drying effect that also promotes the warming of the atmosphere. So be prepared. Temperatures are going to start warming up, and they already have been today. If you've noticed, slick roads, high winds in the Turnagain Arm area and the favored gaps there, just not as strong as what we were talking about yesterday. And then maybe a brief opportunity for some rain showers falling on some of those snowy roads as it winds down. Here's a look at the satellite picture. This is the backup plan there, so if it looks a little different, I apologize there, but here we go. We're going to get it done for you either way. Low pressure is working across Kodiak Island. You can see that stronger southerly flow working its way northward toward the Kenai Peninsula. Already one band of cloud cover has been working its way toward southeast today. That's kind of the remainders of something prior. Out across the eastern Bering Sea, still have a lot of clouds working its way around low pressure here just outside of Bristol Bay. This is on the colder side of what's been coming in, but even that you can see has been lifting northward across the west coast. Look up to the north. And that overall southerly flow is working its way up across the north slope as well. So you will see milder weather in the coming days, as well as you in the interior. Now, as far as precipitation goes for parts of the Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks, and really most of the interior here, the next few days look to be fairly dry. In fact, you should start to see a little more sunshine as we go through the remainder of the week. There, a partly to mostly cloudy sky seems to be in the offing for most locations across the interior as that strong southerly flow works over the Alaska Range and dries out. It will give you milder weather as well, so be prepared for some changes in that regard. Here's a look at the surface map. We've got a low across the northern Gulf. Already a frontal boundary has worked its way inland, and that will start to fall apart. Had some pockets of rain across northern and southern sections of southeast today, and you can see that tight pressure gradient here across the Gulf. That's just squeezing that air together and grabbing onto that warm and wet, moist tropical flow and sending that north toward south central and eventually southeast as it gets a little bit more of a push from the west here with this next wave to the south. Across the Alaska Peninsula, you see a 965 millibar low just to the south. On the north side of that, we've got snow around Cold Bay and False Pass, all the way out to almost Sand Point, and then to the west for Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, and out toward Nikolsky, some periods of rain today. Low pressure just off the coast of the YK Delta at 976 millibars is helping to bring that southerly air northward, but it's also bringing that colder air southward right across St. Lawrence Island, and snow has been falling there today as well as Tin City and out across Wales and the Chukchi coast. Most of the interior was dry today. Saw plenty of clouds, but even that again will be breaking up as we go. Tonight's forecast brings low pressure very close to Kodiak Island and the Kenai Peninsula at 976 millibars. The front will start to work its way towards southeast, bringing a better chance of rainfall into the Panhandle and all the way up toward Prince William Sound. Watch for pockets of mixed precipitation across northern southeast, but by and large, most of the sea level locations will be dealing with wet weather. Look for snow across the western part of the Alaska Range and toward the higher terrain of the Alaska Range out to the north. And across southwest, it looks like pockets of snow are possible around Bristol Bay. Low pressure will sit just off of Sand Point at 969 millibars, and you can see that front stretching all the way out across the YK Delta north of the Seward Peninsula and across the north slope. That is the dividing line between the cold that we've had and the warmer air that's really trying to work its way as far north as possible. Behind that, a pretty decent northerly flow is working across St. Matthew and St. Paul and St. George. Snow showers across the Aleutians will continue there. For Thursday, low pressure is still sitting off the southwest coast, and now you can see that first wave has made its way up to the Alaska Range. This is where we start to see those stronger southeasterly winds working through the Turnagain Arm and Cook Inlet region and Prince William Sound. Now, this region here is probably going to see some spits or drops of rain, but by and large, it's not going to be a very wet period for us on Thursday. You will notice that clouds will probably break up and temperatures will go up. In fact, in the Anchorage area, those daytime highs could reach close to 40 degrees. And that is a huge stretch from where we've been just in the last 2 weeks there when temperatures were well below zero. But that's not all. If you go up to Fairbanks, you're talking about swings in temperatures from 2 weeks ago that could be on the order of 60 to 70 degrees, maybe even more where you are. So it is going to change significantly in the interior as well as south central Alaska. The only really big difference is one part of the mountain range and southward is going to get precipitation, The other part to the north is going to be on the drier side of that flow. Look at southeast. No problem with precipitation here. It looks like periods of moderate to maybe even occasionally heavy rain. A much better chance for that rain to pick up, though, after this next wave moves in. And this will be more of a Thursday night into Friday thing for southern parts of southeast to get into that heavier rainfall side of the storm. Now, the winds will be coming up when this next wave moves through, so watch for those winds again Thursday and into Friday if you're in central and southern southeast. Again, Baranof Island, Prince of Wales Island, you're looking at some of those strong and gusty situations, and because of that, again, a high wind watch is posted for your area. Out across the west, snow showers continue for our friends from Nome to Shaktoolik, all the way down to just about Bethel, Dillingham, King Salmon. You're still looking at a chance for snow as we head into Thursday. And it will be cold, but not as cold as it has been, thanks to that warmer flow working your way. Here's Friday, and low pressure backs off just a little bit more, and that means places like Bethel are going to kind of sneak by with a little bit of a drier day on Friday. Notice the interior. Clouds are breaking up a little bit there. Places like Fairbanks could become partly sunny as you get into the afternoon. Low pressure across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast at 999 millibars keeps the wind moving your way, and snow showers will be possible, and it will still be cold there. Snow showers for most of the Aleutian chain as well as the Pribilofs. And a look down south shows that heavy rain I was talking about moving into the southern part of the Panhandle. Low pressure still sitting across the southern Gulf, and there's still plenty of wet air that wants to work up into the northern and eastern Gulf. So looks like there will still be some snow showers around south central by this point. It will be a little bit colder, but compared to where we have been and compared to how warm it will be, this probably won't be quite so bad. Now, here's a look at temperatures across the region today. 30s and 40s in southeast. We had temps up to about 34 degrees around the valley, all the way down toward Anchorage. 29 in Kenai, 38 in Homer and Seward today, 33 for our friends in Valdez, 35 in Healy and Breezy, 8 in Fairbanks. On the plus side of 0, it's 16 in Eagle and 4 above around Northway, well, 1 below around Tok, 17 below around Fort Yukon. Cold weather still there up around the North Slope, anywhere from 7 below around Barrow to 11 below in Kaktovik, 8 below in Wainwright, and temps anywhere from about 0 around Point Hope and Point Lay to probably single digits there around Shishmaref. 23 above though in Nome. It was 9 above in Galena today, 2 above for McGrath, 30 in Bethel, 24 for Nunivak Island, 3 below out around St. Lawrence Island and Savunga. Bristol Bay temperatures were in the mid to upper 30s, Lake Iliamna 37, Kodiak 39, 30s and 40s down the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint was 37, Dutch Harbor and Unalaska 31, and 30 for Adak. Atka was 29, and it was 27 degrees out in Shemya. For southeast, we see overnight lows are going to stay above freezing, upper 30s to about 40 degrees from Sitka to the capital city all the way down to Ketchikan and Annette. 20s and 30s for Prince William Sound. Portage will be one of the colder spots. Anchorage hovering around 32 to 33 degrees overnight, 34 in Kodiak. Teens and 20s as you head into the Susitna Valley there, 1 below though as you get into Fairbanks, 10 above for Eagle. Fort Yukon's 11 below, Tanana about 3 below. The North Slope, well, once you get north of the Brooks Range there, temps go well below 0, anywhere from 10 to about 20 below. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse 22 below, in fact. 15 above for Nome. Shishmaref 1, Kotzebue 9 degrees. Most of the YK Delta, even the coastline in the teens and 20s tonight. McGrath 27 degrees for you, 22 in St. George and St. Paul, 20s and 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. High temps tomorrow back in the 20s and 30s for most of south central and southwest. Parts of southeast in the lower to mid 40s. The North Slope anywhere from 5 to 10 below, and looking at Nome, 24 with Fairbanks at 22. On to flying weather now. You can see IFR conditions across the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island and the southwest coast, as well as the Alaska Peninsula and parts of the western Alaska Range, south central coastline and parts of southeast. By tomorrow morning, watch for IFR across Chilkoot and White Pass to continue, as well as parts of Prince William Sound, St. Lawrence Island, and hit and miss across the YK Delta. Here's a look at your pass conditions. Anaktuvik Pass, still looking at MVFR. Adigan Pass, probably MVFR through most of the day. And then here's where we start to see a lot of these changes. IFR for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass. Rainy Pass, we're expecting to see MVFR conditions developing by the day. Windy Pass, MVFR through most of the day. Isabel Pass, probably marginal conditions throughout the afternoon. Mentasta Pass still sneaking out with VFR conditions through a good chunk of your Thursday. Tanita Pass, MVFR conditions there. Portage Pass, probably IFR through most of the day, no surprise there, and it will be turbulent as well. And Chilkoot and White Pass expecting to see IFR conditions with snow in the area. On to freezing levels. That warm air is really concentrated just south of Haida Gwaii and up the eastern coast of the Gulf. 2,000-foot freezing lines there coming right over the southern and central southeast panhandle, about 2,000 feet. And surface freezing line there over the Kenai Peninsula and part of Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula there. Icing potential anywhere about 2,000 to 4,000 feet, stretching from the Seward Peninsula, the YK Delta, and the Copper River Basin. But once we get closer to the coast, of course, around the Gulf, that's where that really high moisture content is. So we start to see more possibilities of the occasional, even widespread moderate across Copper River, Prince William Sound, and even South Central. And then we're going to see probably hit and miss higher levels of icing potential across southeast, wrapping around that front. So pay attention to how that's changing over the course of tomorrow. And you can do that by going to weather.gov/AAWU. That is short for Alaska Aviation Weather Unit. Now, of course, across the central and eastern Bering Sea, above 3,000 to 4,000 feet there, also some pockets of moisture rotating around those waves of low pressure. So pay attention to that as we go through the day and the rest of the week. Low pressure has carved out a huge trough, a superhighway of weather there with wind speeds anywhere from 150 to 190 knots, and that is grabbing that warm, wet air and shoving it into the Gulf, so no surprise that the weather pattern has changed and will continue to change. Southerlies at 9,000 feet, 40 to 50 knots coming in from the south over the mainland and slowing down by the time it gets to the north slope, 5 to 10 knots there. South and southwesterlies across the southwest coast and west to northwesterlies behind the low pressure in the Bering. 3,000 feet, a similar pattern. It's tilted a little bit more to the northwest, but overall southeasterlies at 30 to 40 knots for southeast. You can see wind speeds up to 50 to 70 just off the outer coast. Inside 40 to 45. And then as far as turbulence goes, no surprises the next couple days. This is probably what you'll see. A chance for occasional moderate across southeast and the north and western Gulf Coast, as well as the interior around the Alaska Range, the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, and parts of southwest and the interior, and a good chunk of the central and eastern Aleutians. So that's where we are. We've got a lot of changes coming with warm, wet air and, of course, aviation hazards as well as wind for southeast and change in the weather for south central. What about the Marines? We'll take a look at that and your ice edge here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and we have a special guest in the studio today. We welcome Amanda Terborg of the Aviation Weather Center. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amanda's flown in all the way from Kansas City, and for those of you that don't know, the Aviation Weather Center serves the lower 48 for aviators, just as the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit here in Anchorage serves all of Alaska. So I kind of wonder, what's the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City doing to help out Alaska, Amanda?
Yeah, you know, we do a lot of collaboration work with our sister station up here. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work, especially in the satellite meteorology.
Okay.
In particular, we have been looking at ways to better identify icing conditions in clouds, which is a big deal up here because, as I'm coming to find out, even though I'm not from here, you guys have a lot of pilots here.
We have a lot of pilots. In fact, when you say you can't get there from here, that's how you get there.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so with icing potential then, what's Kansas City working on?
Well, we are working on something that will help us, again, identify the icing in the clouds. You don't want ice on your aircraft.
No.
Not only does it add a whole bunch of extra weight to your airframe when it attaches to the wings and the nose cone, but it can also mess with your aerodynamics.
Right.
And in the most serious conditions, that can mess with it enough that you can actually crash.
It changes the shape of the wing, and that makes it sometimes impossible to fly, right?
It does, yeah. So we want to figure out a way to better forecast for that.
Makes sense.
Now this particular image is over Alaska. The colors here are a little goofy. It doesn't look like your run-of-the-mill satellite image.
Okay.
But the red is where you have liquid clouds and the blue is ice. But again, it really doesn't tell you a lot where you have icing conditions in that cloud. Because in those clouds there's little droplets and they're cold and they're actually below freezing, but they're still liquid. And that makes them sticky.
Okay.
So when an aircraft flies through there, those droplets are sticking to the aircraft and it can happen amazingly fast.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to find. And there is a product called the Aircraft Flight Icing Threat that does this. And it's basically looking at the temperature of the cloud, and it's also looking at the size of the droplets to identify a probability and intensity of those icing conditions.
Okay.
And if you flip to the next image, this is a case from Juneau, Alaska, where this probably wouldn't have been the best day to fly around Juneau.
Okay.
Now there was an area of moisture that pushed south from the southwest up along the coast that pushed in a stratus layer. And in the stratus layer, there was a lot of those supercooled liquid drops, or a lot of stickiness.
Okay.
And so the flight icing threat was able to, in the pinks and the reds there, was able to identify where that icing was. Now this is really cool. You know, it's really cool to be able to identify that. There is, you know, of course, caveats to every product. Much as we wish it would happen, sun doesn't shine all the time, unless, I guess, if you live in northern Alaska during the summertime.
Right, right.
But we need that sun to be able to bounce off those clouds and to be able to see where those supercooled drops are.
Okay, so it's a daytime only tool.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, of course, you know, we're in the era of advanced satellite technology, and there is a satellite that can actually use moonlight to see clouds.
Yes.
And so sometime in the future, we hope to be able to do that.
Okay.
Another thing that is a bit of a challenge is multiple layers of clouds. You know, you can only see so far through a thick cloud.
Okay.
And if it's thick enough, sometimes you can't see a layer of icing that's below there.
Right, right.
But even besides those caveats, this product has a lot of potential to help out Alaskan aviators here.
Well, it sounds like a really big deal, and something that forecasters at the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit could use probably on a daily basis, and especially in the middle of a really big storm.
Yeah, I would think so.
Do you have a really good success story in the lower 48 using this tool?
You know, it's a fairly new product, and so we're still evaluating it. But yeah, we've had a lot of cases where we have seen that it does tend to capture those icing conditions.
Okay, very good. Well, Amanda, thanks so much for sharing some of the very interesting satellite imagery and the tools that you're using there at the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City with us here in Alaska. People can probably find some of this information online, right? Yeah,
here is a website here. It's a page from NASA Langley, and they have this imagery as well as a bunch of other satellite imagery that you can take a look at.
Okay, great. And I'm sure our friends at the Alaska Aviation Weather Center and the unit will be using that in the coming months there with your training and your help there to learn more about that tool to help Alaska aviators any day of the year. That's wonderful stuff. So thanks again for joining us, Amanda, and we welcome you to view any of our Alaska weather facts on YouTube anytime at the address below, and we'll see you next time. The sea ice edge has been trying to work its way out toward the west. You can see it's got a little bit closer to St. Matthew Island. It's about 110 to maybe about 130 nautical miles northeast of St. Paul right now, so it's got a little room to move, but it has been working its way southward. The problem is, now that we've got a lot of warmer air working northward, that leading edge is going to be chewed up a little bit more, and probably going to see some significant changes in Cook Inlet over the next couple days as well. So watch for that and more at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. For southeast, watch for higher winds. High wind watches are out for tomorrow night and into Friday, but you can see what's going on. Southeasterlies are picking up on the outer coast, 45 knots with higher gusts there. 25 knots around the Lynn Canal, 40 knots around the Clarence Strait with 8-foot seas there, and anywhere from about 18 to 19-foot seas across the outer coast as we go through Thursday. Things should settle down a little bit on Friday, but it will be a wet and breezy day for sure. 30 and 45 knot winds around some of the areas in the inner channels early, and then dying out by the afternoon to about 35 to 40 knots from the south and southeast, with 6 to 8 foot seas on the inside, and along the outside you can see seas are up to 23 to as high as or low as 21 feet. So a little bit of a change there for Friday as winds diminish ever so slightly. In south central, easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, a 45 knot wind with 10-foot seas and higher gusts across the north and western coast. 35 knots with 7 to 22-foot seas across many areas outside of Kenai Peninsula and the northern Gulf. Northeasterlies coming out Cook Inlet at 40 knots, 30 knots west of the Barrens there with a 9-foot sea, and 20 knots in Shelikof Strait with a 6-foot sea on Thursday. Things should settle down just a little bit on Friday. And northeasterlies will move down Cook Inlet at 20 to 25, significantly slower than they were just 24 hours prior. Easterlies across the northern Gulf, 15 to 25, 14-foot seas on the outside, 12-foot seas east of Kodiak Island on a southerly breeze, and southeasterlies through Shelikof Strait with seas down to 3 feet there by Friday afternoon. Easterlies inside of Bristol Bay, 20 knots with a 3-foot sea in the open waters. Northwesterlies down the Bering Sea coast with 13-foot seas there. They come up to 15 feet down the Pacific coast, and southerlies from Castle Cape to Chignik with a 30-knot wind and 17-foot seas. For Friday, west and southwesterlies across the Bering Sea coast, 20 to 30 coming into Bristol Bay with 6-foot seas there, 14-foot seas down the coast, and westerlies for the North Pacific coast, 11 to 13-foot seas there on a 25-knot wind for your Friday. For the Aleutians, northwesterlies will be in charge for the central and eastern chain. Look for 30 to 35 knots in all areas there, 13 to 17 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast, and along the Pacific coast, anywhere from 15 to 17 foot seas. For the west, 9 to 12 foot seas on a west and northwesterly flow on 25 to 30 knots. By Friday, that comes up to about 25 knots or so from the north and west, and generally westerly winds will still be in charge for the central and eastern chain, looking at 11 to 15 foot seas for the Bering, and about 8 to 11 foot seas there for the central and eastern parts of the chain along the Pacific coast for your Friday. For the west coast, northerlies are still going strong across St. Lawrence Island. Remember, that brings you a 35 below wind chill, and visibility there on the island could be down to about a half mile or so. Northeasterlies north of Nunivak Island over the ice at 25 knots. Northwesterlies moving over the Pribilofs at 40 knots with a 16-foot sea, and easterlies along the southwest coast 20 knots with a 4-foot sea. Look for that to flip around on Friday, a reversal course with a southwesterly flow at 20 knots with an 8-foot sea. Northerlies still working down the coast and over the ice 20 to 30, and westerlies moving over St. Paul and St. George. A 15-foot sea is expected there on 35 knots for Friday. Across the North Slope, easterlies for the Beaufort Sea, 15 knots there. Northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi coast, becoming northerly outside of Kotzebue Sound, 15 to 25 for the Chukchi coast. As we get into Friday, a little bit of an easterly shift over the Kotzebue Sound region, 25 knots there. Northeasterlies down the Chukchi coast, and east to northeasterlies for the Beaufort Sea coast on your Friday. Back to the weather one more time. Low pressure is working across the north and eastern Gulf Coast. That is bringing warm and wet air northward. It is going to bring some strong and gusty winds through central and southern parts of southeast, with a high wind watch starting for the central and southern inner channels as we go into your Thursday night and into Friday there, with winds perhaps up to 60 miles per hour. So watch for more information there. The warm air moving north over south central will also make it windy around the Turnagain Arm and Cook Inlet region. There are no more high wind watches out. However, that warm air could send Anchorage temperatures in south central close to 40 degrees tomorrow. So be careful out on the roads, and more cold for the west. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
If you're interested in serving on your local Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council, the deadline to apply is Friday, February 3rd. Call 1-800-478-1456 for more information.